They say the desert cleanses, that its vast empty spaces can silence the noise in your head, erase the echoes of the past. For me, a former Air Force acoustic engineer named Ben Carter, the Mojave Desert was my last resort. Years spent working on classified sound technologies, developing systems that could listen to a whisper from orbit or generate frequencies that could shatter rock, had left me with a unique affliction. I heard things. Phantom hums, impossible frequencies, the ghost of sounds that weren't there, but lived vividly in my memory. The silence of the desert was supposed to be my cure. I found my refuge in a forgotten corner of the Mojave, miles from the nearest paved road, even further from the neon glare of Las Vegas. My home was a dilapidated single-wide trailer, baking under the relentless California sun. Around me, the landscape stretched to infinity, dry, cracked earth, resilient Joshua trees, and distant, hazy mountains that shimmered on the horizon. It was a beautiful, brutal solitude. For the first few months, it worked. The phantom noises began to recede, replaced by the natural symphony of the desert, the buzz of insects, the rustle of wind through sparse brush, the distant cry of a hawk. But then it began. It was subtle at first, a barely perceptible tremor in the air, a low-frequency hum that vibrated more in my bones than in my ears. I dismissed it as fatigue, as my old affliction returning. But it persisted, growing stronger each night. It wasn't the hum of power lines. There were none for miles. It wasn't the distant rumble of a truck. The nearest highway was too far. This was different. It was deep, resonant, and seemed to come from beneath the earth. My old habits, the ones I had tried so desperately to escape, began to resurface. I dug out my dusty, civilian-grade acoustic equipment, spectrum analyzers, sensitive geophones, directional microphones. I started taking readings. The hum was real. Its frequency was incredibly low, almost infrasound, below the threshold of human hearing, yet potent enough to make the water in my glass subtly ripple. And its source wasn't static. It seemed to shift, to expand and contract, as if something vast and alive was breathing deep beneath the desert floor. The more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't just a random geological phenomenon. There was a rhythm to it, a subtle complexity that hinted at intent. It was like a colossal alien heartbeat resonating through the bedrock. Sleep became a luxury. I spent my nights huddled over my equipment, watching the green line on the spectrum analyzer dance to the unseen rhythm. The silence of the Mojave, which had once been my sanctuary, was now a canvas for a sound that defied all explanation, drawing me deeper into a mystery I had tried so hard to leave behind. I had come seeking quiet, but the desert had offered me a sound that would change everything. Mere listening spiraled into obsession. The engineer in me, the very part of my identity I had journeyed into the wilderness to shed, took complete control. Sleep became a fragmented commodity, stolen in short, anxious bursts between checks on the readings, which I now left running constantly. My trailer, once a sanctuary of quiet, transformed into a makeshift command center. Topographical maps were spread across the small table, riddled with my pencil annotations, and the hum of my aging equipment became the soundtrack to my new involuntary investigation. I knew that passive listening was not enough. To find the source, I had to see it acoustically. I began the painstaking process of triangulation. Every night, as the desert air grew cold and dense, perfect for the propagation of sound waves, I would venture out into the profound darkness. I planted 3 sensitive geophones, devices that detect ground vibrations, in a wide triangle around my trailer, spooling out kilometers of cable across the cracked earth. It was grueling work, demanding precision and patience. The moonlight was so bright, it cast my own sharp, dark shadows as I worked, a solitary ghost moving through the vast, silent landscape. The desert transformed at night. The oppressive heat of the day gave way to a piercing chill. Distances seemed to melt away, and I felt like the only living creature beneath the dome of a billion sharp, indifferent stars. It was in these moments of stark solitude that the drone felt most potent. It was like an invisible companion, a constant low-frequency presence that served as a persistent reminder that I was not alone. Not entirely. The data I collected was both exhilarating and deeply unsettling. After a week of meticulous measurements, comparing the microsecond delays in the vibrations reaching each geophone, I was able to narrow the source to a relatively small area about 5 kilometers northeast of my trailer. It was a nondescript patch of desert, part of a large flat basin leading to the foothills of a mountain range. On my maps, it was simply marked as Dry Lake Valley, a flat, featureless expanse. But something was wrong. The signal emanating from that location was too clean, too stable to be natural. Geological processes, tectonic shifts, subterranean water flows produce chaotic, unpredictable sonic signatures. This drone was different. It was methodical. It had a structure, an almost linguistic complexity that I couldn't yet comprehend. It pulsed with a mathematical precision that sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just a sound, it was a signal. And it was originating from a place where, according to every map and record in existence, there was absolutely nothing. My escape from mysteries had failed. I had found a new one, far larger than any I had known, and it was calling to me from beneath the sand. The 5-kilometer trek from my trailer to Dry Lake Valley was a journey into an even deeper silence. The crunch of my boots on the gravel and my own ragged breathing were the only sounds that seemed to exist. The sun was merciless, a white-hot disk in a pale, washed-out sky, and the heat radiated up from the ground in shimmering waves, making the distant mountains dance and distort. I carried a pack with water, a GPS unit, and a portable frequency counter, a device that would give me a real-time reading of the hum's intensity. As I walked, the needle on the counter began to climb steadily. It was a slow, deliberate ascent, confirming that my calculations were correct. I was walking directly towards the source. The feeling was unnerving, like approaching a vast, sleeping animal, its presence announced only by its deep, rhythmic breathing. There was nothing out here. No abandoned mine shafts marked on my maps, no old homesteads, nothing but the endless, cracked playa of the dry lake bed. I found it in the very center of the acoustic hotspot my triangulation had identified. It was not a natural formation. Half buried in the baked earth was a massive, perfectly rectangular slab of concrete. It was enormous, at least 20 meters long by 10 meters wide, and its surface was scarred and pitted by decades of exposure to the harsh desert elements. It looked ancient. This was no modern construction. The rebar showing at its chipped corners was rusted, a deep, dark brown. It was a feature that had no right to be here, an impossible anchor of civilization in a sea of desolation. Kneeling down, I ran my hand over the surprisingly smooth surface. The concrete was warm to the touch, and I could feel the low-frequency vibration more intensely than ever, a steady, powerful thrumming that seemed to flow directly from the slab into the bones of my arm. As my eyes adjusted to the glare, I saw them. Faint, almost invisible, etched into the surface were symbols. They were not letters from any alphabet I knew, nor were they simple petroglyphs. They were complex geometric patterns, elegant and precise, arranged in a deliberate, repeating sequence. They looked less like writing and more like circuit diagrams, or a form of celestial cartography. It was then that I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, despite the blistering heat, what I had found. This was a cover, a seal. This was the lid to something buried deep below. The drone, the rhythmic signal I had been tracking, wasn't just emanating from the ground, it was coming from whatever lay beneath this concrete scar. My mind, trained by years of working within the secretive world of military projects, raced through the possibilities. This had all the hallmarks of a Cold War-era containment site, a place built to hide something dangerous, something that needed to be forgotten. But the symbols, they weren't human. Whatever was buried here, whatever was now slowly, methodically beginning to wake up, was not from this world. The concrete slab was a door, not a tombstone. That realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. My scientific curiosity, long dormant, flared to life with an intensity I hadn't felt in years. I spent the next few hours meticulously examining the perimeter of the slab, searching for any seam, any crack, any sign of an access point. The drone hummed beneath my feet, now a constant, powerful vibration that resonated through the very soles of my boots. It felt like standing on the back of a colossal, breathing creature. I found it on the western edge, almost completely obscured by drift sand and a cluster of resilient creosote bushes. It was a perfectly square, heavy steel hatch, flush with the concrete, its edges sealed with what looked like ancient, corroded lead. There were no visible hinges, no handles, no obvious way to open it. It was designed to be forgotten, to remain undisturbed. But the drone was growing louder, stronger, beckoning me. My acoustic equipment, which had only registered the hum as a low-frequency wave, now began to pick up subtler patterns. When I placed a geophone directly on the hatch, I heard something else. Faint, rhythmic clicks, and almost imperceptible chimes embedded within the drone. It sounded like a code or a complex sequence. My mind, still trained by years of deciphering military signals, instinctively began to search for patterns. It was too intricate, too layered for me to decode in the field, but it was undoubtedly an intelligent signal. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples. I knew I couldn't stay out here after dark. The desert, while beautiful, was unforgiving, and the thought of being caught by whoever had built this place, or whoever was now monitoring it, sent a shiver down my spine. But as dusk turned to twilight, a strange phenomenon occurred. The geometric symbols etched into the concrete slab, almost invisible in the harsh daylight, began to glow faintly with a soft, ethereal blue light, pulsing in sync with the drone beneath. It was breathtaking, alien, and deeply unsettling. I marked the location precisely on my GPS, took dozens of photos, and recorded hours of the strange, layered sound. Retreating to my trailer, the image of the glowing symbols burned into my mind. I spent the next few days in a feverish state, poring over my recordings, trying to break down the complex sonic patterns. The clicks and chimes, I theorized, were likely a form of authentication, a sequence required to disengage the hatch. The deeper, rhythmic drone was something else entirely, a heartbeat, a broadcast, a living presence. The more I listened, the more I began to hear not just frequencies, but what felt like intent. It was a feeling of deep isolation, of ancient patience, but also of a growing awareness. Whatever was beneath that slab was waking up, slowly, steadily, sending out its call into the vast, indifferent desert. And I, Ben Carter, the man who came to the Mojave to escape sound, was now its only listener. The scar in the earth was not just a symbol of something buried, it was a promise of something about to be revealed, and I knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that I had to go back. The trailer, once a symbol of my retreat from the world, had become a hermetically sealed laboratory of obsession. For 3 days and nights, I didn't step outside. The desert, the sun, the stars, they all ceased to exist beyond the thin metal walls of my new reality. My world was the low-frequency drone, a constant, vibrating presence that seemed to have permanently embedded itself in my subconscious. I ate without tasting, slept in brief, dream-plagued snatches, and worked with a singular, feverish focus that I hadn't known since my most classified days in the Air Force. My entire effort was focused on the intricate sequence of clicks and chimes I recorded from the steel hatch. It was a lock, I was sure of it, but one that responded to sound, not steel. It was a resonance key. My laptop, pushed to the limits of its processing power, ran algorithms of my own design, sifting through the layers of sound, searching for the patterns, the syntax, the underlying logic of the alien signal. I felt like a safecracker from a bygone era, pressing my ear to a vault, listening for the telltale fall of tumblers. On the third night, amidst a haze of exhaustion and black coffee, I found it. It wasn't a complex code, but a simple, elegant piece of acoustic physics. The sequence was a series of prime numbers, rendered as harmonic frequencies. The clicks were the numbers themselves, and the chimes represented the intervals between them. But there was a trick. The frequencies were relational, each one building upon the last, and they had to be broadcast in a perfect, uninterrupted sine wave. Any distortion, any impurity in the signal, and the sequence would fail. It was a lock that demanded not just the right key, but a perfectly steady hand to turn it. Creating that perfect signal was the next hurdle. My civilian equipment was crude, prone to interference. I spent another full day cannibalizing my gear, soldering circuits, and shielding components with aluminum foil, transforming a simple signal generator into a precision instrument. It was a desperate, ugly piece of engineering, but it was the best I could do. I recorded the harmonic sequence onto a portable playback device, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and triumph. I had the key. The decision to go back was never really a decision at all. It was an inevitability. The drone was a question that had been posed to the empty desert, and I was the only one there to hear it. To turn away now would be a betrayal of every scientific instinct I possessed. I packed a small, durable backpack, water, emergency rations, a powerful flashlight, a climbing rope, and my makeshift resonance key. As I stepped out of the trailer into the cool pre-dawn air, the drone seemed to pulse with a new intensity, a sense of anticipation. Or perhaps it was just my own racing pulse, a frantic beat against the slow, ancient rhythm of the thing that waited for me, sleeping beneath the concrete slab. The sun was a mere suggestion of light on the eastern horizon when I arrived back at the concrete slab. The desert was still locked in the profound chill of pre-dawn. The geometric symbols on the slab glowed with a faint, insistent blue, pulsating in time with the drone that now vibrated powerfully beneath my feet. This was it. No turning back. With a deep, shaky breath, I pulled out my modified signal generator and the portable playback device. My hands, surprisingly steady, pressed play. The precise sequence of prime number harmonics, a delicate symphony of clicks and chimes, began to broadcast. I held the speaker directly against the corroded steel hatch, hoping against hope that my crude equipment and my even cruder understanding of alien acoustics were enough. For a long, agonizing minute, nothing happened. The drone continued its low thrum, the cymbals continued their faint glow. And then, a sound. Not the drone, not the signal, but a deep metallic groan that vibrated through the ground, rising from the depths. It was the sound of ancient metal straining against millennia of pressure. The ground beneath me trembled violently and I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing. A thin crack, then another spiderwebbed across the concrete slab. With a final ear-splitting shriek of tortured steel, the hatch, without any visible mechanism, began to slide inward and downward, grinding slowly into the earth. Dust and debris cascaded into the newfound opening. A gust of stale, earthy air, heavy with the scent of ozone and something indescribably ancient, rushed up from the black depths, momentarily stinging my eyes and catching in my throat. I stood at the edge of the abyss, my flashlight beam cutting a path into the absolute darkness below. What I saw confirmed my wildest theories and shattered any remaining shred of conventional logic. It wasn't a ramp or a simple shaft. A series of rusted metallic ladders descended into what appeared to be an impossibly deep vertical tunnel, its walls lined with rough-hewn concrete that looked far older than anything constructed in the Cold War. And, as my light played across the surfaces, I saw them, The same elegant, non-human geometric symbols that adorned the slab above now etched with startling clarity into the walls, glowing with the same faint blue light that seemed to emanate from within the rock itself. The drone was deafening down here, a constant physical presence that vibrated through my entire body. It was coming from deeper still, from the very core of whatever lay beneath. Taking another fortifying breath, I slung my backpack tighter and grasped the first rung of the ladder. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run from this impossible gateway. But the engineer, the seeker of answers, the man who had followed a phantom sound across the desert, simply couldn't. I began my descent, my flashlight beam dancing ahead, illuminating a path into the heart of an ancient alien mystery. The echoes of the past were calling, and I was answering. The descent felt endless. Each rung of the ladder was cold and pitted with an age that felt geological rather than industrial. The air grew cooler, heavier, and the scent of ozone intensified, mixing with the smell of damp, ancient stone. The only sounds were the metallic scrape of my boots on the rungs, and my own ragged breathing echoing strangely in the confined space. The drone, however, was a constant, all-encompassing pressure, a physical vibration that resonated deep within my chest, making my teeth ache. After what felt like 100 meters, my feet touched solid ground. I was standing on a narrow ledge that opened into a space of impossible scale. I swept my flashlight beam across the darkness, and the breath caught in my throat. I was not in a bunker or a military installation. I was in a cathedral. It was a cavern so vast that my light couldn't find the far walls or the ceiling. The architecture was unlike anything I had ever seen, organic and geometric at the same time, with sweeping, graceful arches and walls that curved in non-Euclidean ways that made my head spin. The material wasn't concrete or rock. It was a smooth, jet-black substance that seemed to absorb the light, giving it no reflection. And woven across every surface, like a celestial tapestry, were the glowing blue symbols, intricate networks of what looked like circuits, pulsing softly in time with the drone. I was a microbe in the belly of some colossal, petrified creature. The silence here was different. It was not an absence of sound, but a presence, a heavy, expectant quiet that seemed to absorb my own small noises. The drone was the heartbeat of this place, the one constant in a silent symphony of alien grandeur. Stepping cautiously from the ledge, I began to walk toward the center of the cavern. My flashlight beam danced ahead, a tiny spear of light in an ocean of ancient darkness. As I moved forward, the source of the drone became visible. It was a machine, for lack of a better word, but one of such scale and complexity that my mind struggled to comprehend it. Resting in the center of the chamber was a colossal spherical object, at least 50 meters in diameter, suspended in the air by a web of the same glowing blue energy lines that covered the walls. Its surface was a mosaic of intricate shifting geometric patterns, a constantly evolving puzzle of light and shadow. The drone emanated from this sphere, a pure, resonant frequency that was both the machine's power source and its voice. It was inert, yet felt profoundly, impossibly alive. It was a sleeping god. I had stumbled into a place that was never meant for human eyes, a forgotten chamber holding a piece of alien technology so advanced it bordered on magic. The Cold War bunker theory was laughably inadequate. This place was far older. The Americans hadn't built this, they had found it. And unable to understand or move it, they had done the only thing they could. They buried it, sealing it away from the world under a slab of concrete, hoping it would sleep forever. But now, after decades or perhaps centuries of silence, it was beginning to stir, and its low, persistent call had found a listener. I stood transfixed before the colossal sphere, my mind struggling to reconcile its impossible grandeur with the reality of my desert hideaway. It was a monument to a science, or perhaps an art, that transcended human understanding. The drone, which had guided me here, now filled the entire chamber, a constant low-frequency pressure that felt less like sound and more like the very fabric of this alien space. As I approached the sphere, cautiously, reverently, I noticed that the geometric patterns on its surface were not static. They shifted, coalesced, and reformed with a fluid grace, like a living language. They pulsed with the same soft blue light that covered the walls, but here, on the sphere, the light was brighter, more vibrant, constantly changing. It was an alien display, a silent, complex narrative unfolding before my eyes. My old frequency counter, which had been so reliable in pinpointing the drone's origin, now behaved erratically, overwhelmed by the sheer, raw energy emanating from the sphere. It buzzed and sputtered, the screen flickering with random numbers. But I had another, more sensitive piece of equipment, a wideband audio receiver designed for capturing the subtlest of signals. I pulled it from my pack, placed it on the floor, and extended its directional microphone towards the sphere. What it picked up was not a simple hum. It was a symphony of layered frequencies, a complex tapestry of sound and light that, for my mind, translated into raw information. The drone was the base layer, the carrier wave. Within it, countless other frequencies danced, forming patterns that my engineer brain, honed by years of decoding, instinctively tried to categorize and comprehend. It wasn't spoken language, but a pure, unadulterated form of data transfer. It was a broadcast. I connected the receiver to my laptop, running specialized software I had built for analyzing complex acoustic signatures. The screen, normally filled with mundane waveforms, now exploded with a vibrant, intricate display of data. It was like watching a supercomputer process information, but on an alien scale. And as I watched, fascinated and terrified, the patterns began to resolve into something comprehensible. It was a history. A vast, sweeping narrative presented not in words, but in images, in pure data streams that bypassed my conscious mind and went straight to my understanding. I saw the Earth, beautiful and vibrant from an impossible distance. I saw the rise and fall of ancient civilizations, not just human ones, but others hinted at that existed in deep time or perhaps in other dimensions. I saw the star people, or whatever these beings were, as silent observers, custodians not of Earth, but of the delicate cosmic balance of which Earth was a vital part. Their message was clear, urgent, and heartbreaking. The drone was a warning. The sphere was a record, and its awakening was a distress signal. Humanity, in its rapid technological advancement, was on a trajectory of self-destruction. We were not just harming our planet, we were disrupting a far grander interstellar ecosystem of which Earth was a vital part. The noise we created, the electromagnetic pollution, the nuclear detonations, the unchecked exploitation was reverberating across dimensions, causing ripples in the fabric of existence. The sphere was awakening to project a final, desperate plea. Cease. Listen, before the silence becomes permanent. I was overwhelmed. This wasn't just an alien craft. It was a cosmic librarian, an ancient record keeper, waking up to warn its charges. The drone was not just a hum, it was a lament. It was a cry for attention, broadcast across the silent Mojave. And I, Ben Carter, the man who had sought to escape the noise, had found myself at the heart of the loudest, most important message the universe had ever sent. The urgency of the message pulsed through me, a raw, emotional data stream that bypassed language and went straight to my soul. The sphere was accelerating its broadcast, its blue light intensifying, the drone now a deafening, tangible pressure in the air. It was a last-ditch effort, a desperate plea for the planet to listen before it was too late. I was still trying to process the sheer scope of what I had just received when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic thumping, growing steadily louder. It was coming from above. Heavy, percussive thuds echoed down the vertical shaft, followed by the grinding sound of rock and concrete. They were breaching the surface. My earlier fears about a Cold War bunker suddenly seemed quaint. This wasn't a small, clandestine operation. This was a full-scale military assault, drawn by the intensified drone, by the very distress signal the sphere was emitting. They were coming for it. They were coming for me. Panic clawed at my throat, but the sheer, overwhelming presence of the sphere, its desperate, silent broadcast, held me rooted. I knew what they wanted. They would seize the machine, attempt to weaponize it, or contain it, never understanding that it was a living library, a warning system, not a threat. Their approach was the very embodiment of the destructive path the Star People had warned against. My meager equipment, my laptop and audio receiver, were now sparking and overheating, pushed far beyond their operational limits by the sphere's raw energy. The data stream became a torrent, too fast, too dense for me to fully comprehend. Yet the core message remained: the silence. Cherish the silence, or it will be all that remains. Suddenly the drone changed. It didn't stop, but a new layer, an even lower frequency, vibrated through the chamber, making the very air throb. It was a defensive measure, I realized, not aggressive, but a powerful, energetic shield emanating from the sphere, pushing back against the encroaching forces above. Loose dust and small rocks began to trickle from the ceiling, illuminated by the powerful beams of military-grade spotlights that now pierced through the growing cracks. The ceiling, ancient and resilient, was giving way. I looked back at the sphere, its intricate patterns shifting with a frantic, beautiful urgency. It was putting all its remaining power into this final broadcast, this last attempt to be heard, and I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stop them from coming in, but I could ensure they wouldn't capture it. With trembling hands, I retrieved my old, modified signal generator, the same one I had used to open the hatch. It was built for precision, for specific frequencies. If I could overload it, if I could feed it the wrong kind of energy, it might just create enough interference, enough chaotic resonance to disrupt their breach, to buy the sphere precious moments, or even to trigger a failsafe that would make it impossible to capture. It was a desperate, probably suicidal plan, but it was the only one I had. The sounds of heavy machinery, the shouts of men, and the rhythmic clang of drills grew deafening. They were almost through. I looked back at the vast, silent alien machine, humming its mournful song, and then back at the crumbling ceiling, illuminated by the harsh, invading light. The Mojave had called me for peace, but it had instead given me a war. A silent, desperate war for the soul of humanity, fought over the ancient, slumbering heart of an alien machine. I knew my time was running out. The ceiling groaned, then cracked with a sound like thunder, showering the chamber in dust and debris. A section of the ancient concrete collapsed, revealing the harsh, midday sun and the chaotic scene above. Heavily armored military personnel, cutting equipment, and the glint of rifles. They had breached. I didn't hesitate. With a final desperate surge of adrenaline, I aimed my modified signal generator at the colossal sphere, pushed every dial to its maximum, and activated the broadcast. Instead of the precise harmonic key, I flooded the chamber with a chaotic, high-energy sonic blast, a calculated act of acoustic sabotage. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The entire chamber vibrated with an unbearable resonance. The blue light from the sphere intensified to a blinding supernova, then flickered wildly, the geometric patterns on its surface dissolving into a maelstrom of light. My equipment overloaded, sparking and smoking, useless. The ground beneath me bucked and heaved. Above, the military's cutting tools screamed, then died, their electronics fried by the overwhelming, chaotic energy. Figures on the surface cried out as they were thrown back by a silent, invisible force. The drone, which had been my constant companion, now reached an agonizing crescendo, vibrating through every cell of my body, threatening to tear me apart. It was too much. The ancient alien structure couldn't withstand this. And then, with a final, shuddering release of energy that pushed all the air out of my lungs, the sphere began to sink. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed, it descended into the depths of the earth, the glowing blue symbols on its surface shrinking, fading until they were gone. The colossal chamber groaned, the walls flexing, then began to collapse inward, sealing itself with a deafening rumble. I don't remember much after that, only darkness. The frantic scramble to climb the rapidly collapsing ladder, the blinding flash of light as the surface gave way, and the terrifying, deafening sound of a mountain being swallowed by the earth. I must have been thrown clear, landing hard on the desert floor, losing consciousness. I awoke hours later, disoriented and bruised under the relentless Mojave sun. The air was thick with dust, and the drone was gone. Silence. A profound, absolute silence that was more unsettling than any noise. I staggered to my feet, my body aching, and looked towards where Dry Lake Valley had been. There was no debris, no wreckage, no smoking crater. Instead, the desert floor had simply sunk. A perfectly circular depression, hundreds of meters across, now marred the landscape, as if a colossal invisible hand had pressed down on the earth, leaving no trace but its silent imprint. The concrete slab, the hatch, the entire ancient structure, all were gone, swallowed back into the earth, sealed away, perhaps forever. I spent the next few days in a daze, collecting my scattered thoughts and what little equipment remained. The military, disoriented and facing a complete electronic failure, had retreated. They likely assumed some seismic event, a geological anomaly. They found no alien technology, no evidence of what they sought. The secret was safe. Back in my trailer, I held my battered frequency counter. It was mostly dead, but sometimes, on a quiet night, when the desert air was still, I could pick up the faintest, almost imperceptible signal, a low-frequency hum, just at the edge of hearing, a ghost of the drone. It was weaker now, a whisper where there had been a roar, but it was there, a quiet, lingering presence. The Mojave had called me for peace, but it had instead given me a responsibility. I was no longer an engineer haunted by phantom sounds. I was a guardian of a cosmic secret, a listener to the hum that lingered. The alien sphere had returned to its slumber, its message delivered, its warning echoing in the heart of one man. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that my mission now was to live that message, to cherish the silence, to respect the delicate balance, and to listen, always listen, for the faint, crucial hum that reminds us we are not alone, and our actions resonate far beyond our understanding.